Good evening, everyone. This is Isaac, and I'm here to review the Chapter 4 exercises for our classes and objects in Java Part 1. Um, Honestly, the IDE does a lot of this work for you. That's kind of one of the great things about IntelliJ. However, you can do this manually. It just takes more time, and I think that you should start using the tools that are available to you to help expedite your work and get it done as quickly as possible, especially with the pace of this class. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. But if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to reach out, comment on this video, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. So we only have 4 very basic exercises, and they're kind of getting you set up. So right now you're setting the groundwork for your future classes and objects exercises. I recommend that you take a lot of consideration into what you do here and you be very careful with doing this. Okay? So we'll just go ahead and get started. So our very first exercise is open up the file student.java and add all of the necessary getters and setters. Think about the access level of each field and method should have, and try reducing the access level to at least one setter to less than public. So we'll go ahead and do that real quick. Let's go ahead and get it knocked out. Okay. So we're going to swap over to IntelliJ. And there we are. Now, your student should honestly already have some of this information filled out. Mine, I accidentally deleted stuff. So there is the stuff that should already be there standard, which is your private string name, your private int student ID, private int number of credits, and private double GPA. The only thing that they want us to do here is to add the necessary getters and setters and to try to instantiate this and try to reduce the access level of a setter to private. Now, with that being said, you can definitely go down the list and do public static get name hang on, I actually messed that up. Public void, not static. Oof. All right, so you can definitely do public void get name and just do return name. And you can also do, why are we getting this error right here? Let's see. Make get name return java.lang.string. Let's do set name as well, because I feel like for some reason it didn't like the fact that we omitted the setter first. So public void set name. And here we actually have to pass an argument. So here we would pass a string name. And we would do this dot name equals name. Okay. And this really does not like this at all. Actually, man, it really does not like this. Okay, so for some reason it's not liking this. But, so what I wanted to kind of display this with you, and we'll actually review this, is essentially that you can do this, but it's a fairly manual process, especially considering that you can just, and I'll comment this out so we can come back and review this. But you can just right click in IntelliJ and scroll down to generate, or you can use the Alt Insert shortcut. That will get you a little generate shortcut. Just click getter and setter, and I wish you could see it, but for some reason my OBS doesn't like it. So when you click getter and setter, it should, oh yeah, you guys can see it. That's perfect. Okay, so it'll pop up this little window right here, which it will say, hey, select your files to generate, select your fields to generate getters and setters for. You can always click on the first one, hold shift, click on the last one, and it'll highlight them all. Then you just click OK. Boom. Okay, so I was doing public void instead of public string. So I was trying to pass a void into a string. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's why get name wasn't working. But as you can see, everything was generated automatically. No issues off of my side. One thing to note with these, and I actually am still going to step through them, is first of all, you'll notice that all of our getters and our setters are public. That's because we don't have a main class here, so we can't run them in here. But we can run them in other instances. So I'll explain what that means in a second. But essentially, public string get name returns the name. Public void set name passes your string name. Whatever value you have up here, string name has to correspond down here. For student ID, it just returns, but you're also returning an int. So the value for this public has to match whatever's up here. Your argument has to match. It's very important to keep this in mind. Now, what we're also going to do, because the instructions, and let me pull them up. Let's see. Okay, so the instructions also want us to try reducing the access level of at least one setter. Well, we're going to kind of jump around a little bit just because it's kind of confusing if we don't. But we're going to do this piece in a few. We're actually going to instantiate the student class using ourselves. So for the number of credits, give yourself 1 for this class and a GPA of 4 because you're a Java superstar. Yes, you are. Okay, so what we first need to do is, and I'll minimize the browser, we need to have a constructor. Why? Let's go to school practice. And here we're supposed to instantiate ourselves. If we do student name equals new student, it technically automatically gives you a blank constructor, which means that you can do student, oh, well, actually, name dot set name and pass Isaac. You can do name dot set student ID. We'll give ourselves number 1. And remember, you have to pass them as whatever they correspond. We can do name dot number of credits. And we'll do, let's say that we got 1 for this class. And for some reason, it's not liking, oh, because we're getting, not setting. And we'll do name dot set GPA. And we'll get a 4.0 for ourselves. So if we print out everything, let's do name plus, and we'll do name dot get name. And we're actually just going to copy this and paste a couple of times. And we're going to do, instead of get name, we need to do student ID. Good. Okay, so student ID. And here, we actually have to change this to get student ID. Oh, nope, that's set. Apparently, I am blind. It happens. And we need to remove these. Okay. And now we also need our number of credits. And now we need to do our, oh, wrong button. Yay. And we'll do name dot get GPA. So if we go ahead and run this, So it runs successfully, gives you the name, the student ID, the number of credits, and the GPA. We could have done this a lot easier by having a constructor, and we're actually going to go into the student.java and generate this one. We can technically generate this one with the same right-clicking, generate, and generate your constructor, then just highlight all of the fields. Actually, I'll just show you all how to do this on both ways. So essentially, what you can do is you can do public student. So it's the right way to put this. Okay, so the one that's currently running right now is this, just an empty constructor. What this is doing is this is allowing us to just declare a new student and then manually add everything. And this is the default behavior, I believe. So if we run, you'll see that it runs without any issue. This is an implied, because we didn't actually have it in our code. Now that we do, it actually makes sense. But what happens if we do student string name, comma, int student ID, comma, int number of credits, comma, double GPA? Well, now it's actually handling arguments, which means that we actually need to do something with them. So we can do this dot name equals name, this dot student ID equals student ID, this dot number of credits equals number of credits, and this dot GPA equals GPA. Okay, one thing to note is now that we've explicitly stated our constructor here, if we try to run this, it actually does not like it. Reason being, now that we've explicitly written out how our instructor needs to go, now that default behavior is no longer applying. So since that default behavior is no longer understood, it's going, hey, I don't know how to handle this. You're missing your name, your student ID, your number of credits, and your GPA all in your declaration. You can actually overload your constructor, which is something that we discussed here, with an empty constructor, I think that's what it's called, as public student without variables. And now if we try to run this again, it'll work. Why does it work? Because now it's actually going, oh, hey, now I know that I have two ways to handle this. I can either use all of your parameters in one fell swoop, like you have on lines 16 through 20, or I can just have an empty parameter, instantiate an empty object, and then assign everything manually, which is a little more work, but sometimes it's needed. Okay, so we could rewrite this as new student, and I'm actually just going to comment this out. And we are going to do student name equals new student, and we're going to pass our arguments. So name is going to be Isaac, comma, and you'll see that IntelliJ actually gives you, hey, you need a string name, you need an int student ID, an int number of credits, and a double GPA. So it's smart enough to realize, oh, we're declaring a new student. Student is right here, and we're using arguments. So this is the one with arguments that I can find. Let me go ahead and show you what you need. So we'll do Isaac. We did student ID of 1. We did number of credits 1, and we did a 4.0 GPA because we smart like that. And now if we run this, it still works without any issue. The only difference is now we didn't need to do all of this manually because we passed our parameters in here. So that takes care of the first half of the first one and the second half of the second well, and the entirety of the second requirement. So now we're actually going to go back and we're going to do this change right here, which is try reducing the access level of at least one setter to less than public. And let's go ahead and do that real quick. So we're going to go into our student and we're going to change our set name to, instead of public, to be private void set name. Okay, so now set name is listed as private, and just for giggles, let's go ahead and pull up here what private means in our browser. So let's see, there we go. So private means that an item can be accessed in the same class, but not in the same package subclass, not in a different package subclass, and not in a different package non-subclass. So what that means is if we try to do, and let's go back to our actual code. Okay, there we go. So now, if we try to run this, it should still work. And it did, because we're calling our constructor, which is setting everything. But let's say that we didn't want to use this, that for some reason, we just wanted to use our empty constructor here. Now, when we run this, it doesn't work. It's saying, hey, java.setName has a private access in org, which means that this technically doesn't exist for this item. If we wanted to use this, what we would have to do is we would actually have to copy this, and I'll show you this in a minute, and we would have to use this inside of the class, which means that we would need our main, and setName now works. So we run inside of the class here. Why aren't you liking that? Oh, because I'm still declaring it up here. So let's go ahead and just comment this out for now. There we go. We'll go back into student Java and we'll run just public class student. Okay, so let's just comment out all of this for now and we'll be back. Okay, so now let's actually run this. And we're just going to run down here at this level. Oh, man, you really don't like this. Oh, well, yeah, that's why. There, happy? Okay. Last time, I promise, this one should work. Okay. So it did assign everything. It didn't print anything out because we didn't ask it to print anything out. But let's just do this. Let's just, going to copy this. And we're going to go ahead and paste this into student.java. Now, a quick way to comment or uncomment everything is just highlight what you want to comment or uncomment and do control and the comment sign. Boom. Uncomment or comment in mass, which is super helpful. So now when we run this right here, we can use the set name and we can print the names. There we go. And everything works because we can access this private set name because we're in the same class. But if we continue to try to run it out here, let me undo that and uncomment all of this out and uncomment this out. It continues to throw errors just because this set name and 20, 1. One too many? Yep, one too many. Okay. If we try to run this now, it says, hey, this set name has a private access in your launch code class. I can't use this. So just a quick note to keep in mind there, but we're actually going to go back here and change this to public so that our class will please stop breaking. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and head back to our exercises and close this window out. There we go. Okay. Part 3, in the school package, create a class course with at least 3 fields. Before diving into IntelliJ, try using a pen or paper to work through what these might be. At least one of your fields should be an array list or a hash map, and you should use your student class. So with this particular piece, let's think about a course. What would a course have? First of all, a course would have a subject. We have English, we have mathematics, we have history, we have world history, we have lifetime wellness, we have biology, etc. So let me see if I can pull up a notepad here. Oh, nope, OBS is not allowing me. So, and we need at least an array list or a hash map. So we will do, well, first let's create our new class. Let's see. Java class. We're going to call this courses. Courses was what it wanted to be called, right? Let's confirm. It did want to be called course, singular, not plural. Okay. So we're going to name this one course. Okay. And we're not going to add it. Okay. So now we have course. And just thinking through, what do we need? We need a subject. What else would we need? Well, we need a teacher, first of all, because, someone has to teach the class. Ain't going to be me. And last and least, if we're thinking from an administrative standpoint, we would need a roster of who's in that class, correct? So students. So let's think about this just from a programmer standpoint. Our subject would be a string, private string subject. Okay. Our teacher. What do you think they would be? Personally, I think they would be a private string as well. And what would the last piece be of our students? Well, let me review the assignment real quick. This piece of it anyway. Let's see. Yeah. So, and this is kind of very weirdly written because we have some weird stuff over here. So for now, let's just say that we need a roster, and we can make that an array list or a hash map, and we should use our student class. So let's do private and an array list. Or should we do, let's do hash map. Hash map, and for students, and for a hash map, remember, we need a key and a value pair. So theoretically, we could do a key value with either the class teacher or the subject, but for now, let's just keep it simple. And yeah, let's stick to an array list of our student object. Remember, objects, if you've been following the instructions, begin with a capital letter. Private, array list, student, and students. Okay. I mean, that's literally it. So we have the subject, the teacher, and the students. Okay. And is that it for that piece? Let's pull up our assignment. Indeed, it is. So for part 4, and again, this is something that we're going to be building on throughout the course. So don't feel like, oh, Isaac's just taking the easy way out, or oh, this doesn't feel like I'm doing anything. You are doing something. You're just setting your future self up for success. Sorry, my headset is about to die, and I don't think we want that. So let me connect this thing. There we go. Can you hear me now? Good. All right. So now we have to create a class called teacher with 4 fields: first name, last name, subject, and years teaching. Add getters and setters to the class and add the access level to each field and method in the class. When adding your getters and setters, think about what we read in the section on encapsulation. What access modifier restricts the access for most of what we need? If it's a field, could we restrict the access to private and use getters and setters? And if we do set fields to private, what access level do we have to give our getters and setters? So let's just go ahead and do that. And we'll swap back over to IntelliJ. Okay, so we'll right click and we'll do a new Java class. And this one will be teacher. We're not going to add it automatically. Okay, so we needed first name, last name, subject, and years teaching. So I would say string first name. Oh, string last name. String subject. And int years teaching. Okay. Now, one thing to note is now that we have all of these in, we need to think about their access level. So we can leave them as public, which would leave them exposed and anyone can access them, or we can set them to private. Remember that earlier in our book, it was stated that best practice is to make whatever we can private. So we're just going to go ahead and do that for these. And we can just copy, paste, paste, and paste. Okay. So now we need to do another thing, which is going to be setting up our constructors. So first we're going to do a teacher constructor, well, a blank one. They're all teacher constructors technically. So public teacher, and this is just going to be the blank one in case we need to get very technical or make some changes to it. And we're going to do one that takes all of your arguments at the same time. So public teacher, and we're going to do string first name, string last name, string subject, too high, I mean capital letters, subject, and int years teaching. And now our constructor is fairly simple. We just do this dot first name equals first name, this dot last name equals last name, this dot subject equals subject, and this dot years teaching equals years teaching. So now we can declare it by itself and then add everything manually, or we can declare it in one fell swoop. So that was the easy part. Now I'm actually going to do the getters and setters with just the automatic generation. So we'll right click and we'll scroll down to our setter option, generate option, or you can do alt insert. We'll select getter and setter, and yeah, okay, so y'all can't see this. I'm just going to select all of them and hit OK. And boom, there you have your getters and your setters for this entire thing. One thing to note, you will want to keep your getters and your setters public just because, or well, your setters definitely, your getters probably, because that's how developers or anyone else can see the information. Just because remember, these are going to be run potentially elsewhere. If they were just to be isolated to this specific object, then you could private them no problem. But since we might be using them in other locations, you're definitely going to want to leave them public. Speaking of public, we can actually use this elsewhere in our course. So instead of passing a string here, we can actually pass an object of teacher. And this is 100% valid because now instead of saying, hey, we just need a teacher, we're saying, oh no, we're actually going to use this object of teacher, and then teacher will have their first name, their last name, their subject, and their years teaching all rolled in here. So that's actually some optimization that you can do on the back end, front end. And these assignments were a little weird because they jumped around a lot, but now you see the benefit. So we have created our student.java and added all of our necessary getters and setters. We did reduce the access level of at least 1 to private. We have the subject class. We created our subject, or our student class, sorry. We created our course, and we did our array list with our student class. And then we created our teacher with first name, last name, subject, and years teaching. We added the getters and setters, and we even went a little above and beyond and constructed our constructors. So what access modifier restricts the access from the most for what we need? We decided with private. If it's a field, could we restrict the access to private and use getters and setters? 100%. And if we do set fields for private, what access level do we give our setters and getters? Public, because as we tried earlier, this piece feels like we're going to use it elsewhere. And if it's private, we won't be able to use it outside of that class. So that about wraps up our 4.7 exercises, classes, and objects. Thank you very much for watching this. I appreciate your time. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to reach out. I always welcome it. Yeah, that's about all I got. Have a great day, stay safe, and I will see you at the next one.